leave a like on this video. I think we had a conversation last week where I said that I would take Trey McBride over George Kittle, and I got a lot of support from the chat. You were a little bit on the fence because George Kittle, he's goated, but he's also over 30 years old. And we were talking about it last offseason. Every year, George Kittle has what's called the tight end U, where he gets a bunch of up and coming or solidified great tight ends around the NFL to come and like work out at his camp. You'll have to correct me on the location. Is it back in Iowa in his hometown?
No, it looks like it's in Nashville. At least
Okay.
Trey McBride pointed it out because he's in his caption was Nashville is humid as something. He used some
So long
adjective.
story short, Trey didn't get invited last year. He blows up on the NFL scene. He's invited this year, and this was on his Instagram. This is how it broke. You broke this news on Instagram that Trey's at tight end U. So there's a box checked. So on top of this, there's also a clip on our PHNX Cardinals Instagram where basically George Kittle is asked who's standing out. He mentions Sam Laporta, and then he mentions what I think is his new NFC West tight end daddy, Trey McBride. And you love to see that because, again, I think at the end of the day, there's the old guard of Kittle and Kelsey, maybe Hall of Famers, definitely solidified, but on the downturn of their careers, over 30 years old, a tight end, that doesn't age well. Trey McBride is in the spry old age of 24 years old. Sam Laporta was a rookie. He was sensational. Like, I think there's a reason that fantasy football enthusiasts have Trey McBride as a top 3 to 5 tight end. Book it. Even with the infusion of targets to Marv and, Michael Wilson solidifying himself and the aforementioned Greg Dortch, like Trey McBride is still the most proven pass catching entity on the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, what Kittle basically was asked, like, who's the next wave? Who's the next great class of tight ends? And it wasn't, Kyle Pitts. It wasn't Brock Bowers. It wasn't getting too far ahead of ourselves. It was guys who produced last year. And Sam
Yeah.
Laporta, who was phenomenal for the Lions as a second-round pick. And then Trey McBride, who had over 80 catches and 800 yards and was Kyler Murray's primary target and really didn't get a full season, even though he was, unlike his rookie year where he was inactive to start his career. He had to kind of play second fiddle to Zach Ertz out of, the coaching staff's paying Ertz respect, but weren't playing the best tight end on the roster. And McBride proved them wrong with that, with his play down the stretch. And, I mean, it's, you got to have one of these players. And the shelf life on a tight end, as you're pointing out, it's not very long because of how physically demanding position is. I mean, the biggest knock I think on Kittle up until last year was his inability to stay on the field because he blocks with such physicality and he's getting tied up. He's getting, defenders going at his legs and he's just getting nicked and knacked all over the place. And as do most tight ends who want to be complete players. And I think Trey McBride has that same desire, and he's opening eyes at his position. Tight end university, it's really cool. I mean, it was Kittle, it's Kelsey, and it's Greg Olson who basically founded it. And it was kind of like, let's get together and kind of talk shop and kind of give our little secrets of the trade and wanting to develop and legitimize this position that's been far too often overlooked, especially by this Cardinals franchise for, 2 decades. So it's really cool to have a representative at tight end university in that he's already getting a lot of love from the guys that founded it and some guys that have been playing the position for a high level.
So Trey McBride last year, people knocked him for his touchdowns. He only had 3. At least 2 of those. 2 of those came with Kyler Murray. One of those came, I think, in garbage time with Dobbs against Baltimore. We barreled over like 6 defenders.
Remember they pushed him in?
Yeah, that was pretty wild. But 2 of those, and so he had 2 touchdowns in 8 games with Kyler Murray. So if you project that out, he's going to have at least 4 or 5 this year. We happen to think it's going to be much more because, again, they were using number 1 corners and DBs against him. Now you can't do that with Marv and Michael Wilson. Laporta, I think Laporta and Kittle, and Trey McBride are right there with each other. Like Laporta had a little bit more yards and then had many more touchdowns, but I think that was a byproduct of their offense. There was a ton of mouths to feed, but at the same time, he's getting single covered by off-ball linebackers and safeties. That benefited him. He also has Ben Johnson, who I like Drew Petzing. Drew Petzing's not Ben Johnson yet. I think if you want to put Laporta number 1, that's fine. There's not a young tight end or a tight end in general I would rather build around than Trey McBride at 24 years old. Like people want to say Mark Andrews. Well, Mark Andrews has been coming off major injury and he's 28 years old. But if you want to take Mark Andrews for 1 to 2 years, that's fine. But then outside of that, it's like Kittle's old, Kelsey's old. You mentioned, Kyle Pitts. I'm done, jumping on that gravy train. It's never worked out right. Mm-hmm. There's some guys that, Njoku's a nice player, but like, I think you can make an argument like it's a coin flip. The best young tight ends in the NFL. It's not Brock Bowers. Get out of here with that. It's Laporta or Trey McBride. And there's a reason Kittle said that, because you mentioned it. These guys who are reaching 30 or over 30, they're about done. Like, a lot of people thought Kelsey was going to retire. I think this is George Kittle's last year with San Francisco. Like, Trey McBride is going to sign the biggest tight end contract in Cardinal history next offseason. Like, you're talking about somebody doing this right now that you want to hitch your wagon to.
Well, I think what's going to separate him from a lot of the young guys is his willingness to do the dirty work, to really be a factor in the run game. And it's something that McBride has spoke on and really wanted to become a complete tight end and be a force in the run blocking game, where I think a lot of guys are coming into the league with the expectation. I mean, we'll see what happens in Vegas with Bowers, and we'll see what, the Lions, if what Laporta is going to be asked to do now that he's already emerged as a main receiving threat, where the Arizona Cardinals are going to do what they want to do offensively, is establish the run game. And, they're going to need to get that from that position. And I know Tip helps that, alleviates that. Higgins didn't, even though he's a really good pass catching tight end, but the most complete one is Trey McBride. And I think that's what is going to keep him and get that big gaudy extension, and what's going to keep him in the conversation, even if he doesn't match statistically what these guys are going to do. Like, is he going to finish in the top 5 statistically, in receiving yards and touchdowns? Maybe not, because they're guys that are just getting force-fed the ball and they're vocal points of the offense, where now with the addition of Marv, with what we're predicting and projecting is the emergence of Michael Wilson, with Greg Dortch in the slot, with the emphasis on the run game, like, there are a lot of mouths to feed, but Trey McBride's going to benefit. It's going to be more quality over quantity, and he's not going to be the number one, option at a necessity. And when you talk about the red zone woes, or whatever you want to call it, the productivity or lack thereof, 1 touchdown in his final season at Colorado State, but the huge, receiving numbers, and then, just 4 through 2 seasons. I mean, it's because you saw, especially like against the Bears, like they had Jalen Johnson against Trey McBride.
Right.
He had to face some top coverage. It's not going to be the case any longer. He's going to be facing some bad safety. He's going to be facing sometimes linebackers. He's just going to eat alive. So I think he's going to be in a really good position to continue and parlay last year's success going forward.
Yeah, a lot of people love to cherry pick stats, and I'm going to do it right now because I think it makes sense. Kyler Murray with Trey McBride, their time together, just under 600 yards last year in the 8 games. If you project out his yardage total with just Kyler Murray and say, let's project that out over 17 weeks, it's over 1,100 yards. It's at 1,143 yards, Kyler Murray and Trey McBride. And again, if he gets to 900 yards, that's a sensational season. I would also argue to the people that are scoffing at him being able to reach 825 yards again, who was starting at tight end for this team last year egregiously. Respectfully, it was Zach Ertz. You look at the first 5 weeks of the season. Yeah. Trey McBride never had more than 3 targets per game. Think about that for a second. 2 against Washington, 3 against the Giants, 1 against Dallas, 1 against the Niners, 3 against the Bengals. Yeah. I mean, and then it cranked up out of necessity, and Ertz got banged up a little bit, but I mean, like, he basically did not have a presence in this offense until a quarter of the way into the season, and he still put up those numbers. So you can make the argument, they didn't have anybody else at the end of the year, and it was all Trey McBride, and that's not how it's going to be this year. First of all, try to stomach watching this team offensively the first month and a half.
If he started week 1, they'd probably win that game against Washington.
Oh, easily.
Remember,
Zach Ertz dropped a touchdown.
He did. I love this from Mr. Fat Gangster. The McTip combo is going to be lethal in the end zone. I don't like that.
I don't want that. I don't want a McTip. I don't want McTippin all over this show.
We are McBridesmaids. That's official. This is the official This is the official McBridesmaids podcast. And I am willing to pardon Drew Petzing and Jonathan Gannon for that 5-week stretch to open the season.
I like
But it
Zach
can't
Ertz.
happen again.
No, it'll never happen. Like, that was the one area where we're like, what are we doing? Like,
Mhm.
you just cut Colt McCoy. You made the right decision. You got the better QB in here in Dobbs. Time to cut Zach Ertz. They got him a couple game checks before the holidays kicked in. But Trey McBride started 17 games last year. He probably legitimately has like 1,200 yards. But again, very fortunate for Trey McBride. Very fortunate for these super chats.